Alright, lesson 4.5, negative exponents and reciprocals. What we're going to be doing in this lesson is taking the information that we've learned about dealing with fractional exponents in the previous lesson and kicking it up a notch. We might make them negative and see what happens there. Alright, so let's get this cracking here. So recall, the reciprocal of 2/3 is what? Well, you guys might have forgotten what it means to take the reciprocal. The reciprocal, by definition, now students always want to tell me reciprocal is just flipped. Well, yeah, kind of. Well, what I'd rather you say for reciprocal is, yeah, the reciprocal of 3/2 is just it flipped. But the reciprocal, by definition, it's whatever number you multiply by that number to give you 1. So you see, if you were to take 2 and multiply it by 3 here, you get 6. And 3 times 2, you'd get 6. 6/6 is just 1. So think of it that way, right? Rather than just flipped. Two numbers, basically, whose product is, I'll write it right here, two numbers whose product, of course in math we know product means multiplication, is 1. So reciprocal of 4 means what number do you multiply by itself? Well, mechanically you're right, you just flip it and make it 1/4, but really 1/4 of 4 gives you 1. Alright, so that's just a little reminder of what it means to take the reciprocal. So I talked to you about that because we're going to be taking the reciprocal quite a bit in this lesson. So whenever you see a power with negative exponents, what do? Well, it says here, when x is any non-zero number and n is a rational number, x to the power of negative n is the reciprocal of this. So all you're going to do, as an example, if you had 2 raised to the power of -3, well, you're just going to think of that as it's like 1/2 to the power of +3. So you take the reciprocal of the 2, like so. So we're going to explore some examples with this. You'll see that this is not too complicated. It's probably the shortest lesson of the unit here. So evaluating powers with negative integer exponents. So let's take a look. 7 to the power of -2. What I always want you to think of first, folks, is get rid of the negative exponent. So to do this, I'm simply just going to go and take the reciprocal. So it becomes 1/7 all to the power of 2, like so. All right. Now, when we simplify here, we simply just get 1/49. So to show on your calculator, if you took 7 and we raise it to the power of -2, that is equivalent to you going 1 divided by 49. You'll see we get the exact same thing. All right. Now, this one is a little bit more complicated because we have a fraction raised to a -3. Well, the reciprocal of that fraction just means I want you to go ahead and flip it. So I flip it, I'm going to write this as 3 now over 10. But now it's not raised to the power of -3, it's just simply a +3. And now we're going to go and cube each one of those numbers. 3 cubed, of course, we should know by now is 27. And 10 cubed is 1,000. Just means it has 3 zeros. Those would be your solutions for those two. What happens when we have a decimal? Well, decimal, you can deal with it a couple different ways. My suggestion is to change to a fraction for this one. All right. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rewrite this as this is the same thing as having -3/2 all raised to the power of -4. Okay. So now that I've done that, I'm going to take the reciprocal because I want to get rid of that negative exponent right here. When I take the reciprocal, it's just going to change. Now you're going to see what I'm going to do is I'm just going to always leave the negative up in the numerator. All right. It's just kind of a form of habit that I want you guys to get into. So now we have -2 raised to the power 4. Well, recall, whenever you have a negative raised to an even power right here, you should expect your answer to become positive. So -2 to the power 4 we know gives you 16. And 3 to the power 4 is the same thing as 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 81. 16/81. These fractions right here, you'll note that I haven't simplified them, and the reason is they cannot be simplified. 27/1000 is simplified, and so is 16/81. So always check to make sure that you have it simplified. So on this next page, the note we have is we can apply the meaning of rational exponents and negative exponents to evaluate powers with negative, there's a little typo right here, rational exponents. All right. So what we're going to start looking at is what happens now. Like on the previous page, I would just take -8 and I was raising it to power, let's say, -3. Well, now I'm going to kick it up a notch. We're going to make that raised to a power of a negative fraction. So we're combining the information we've learned in this lesson and the last. So for example, the rational exponent in the power 8 to the power of negative 2 over 3 indicates these operations. So what do you do with the negative? You're just going to take the reciprocal. So that would become, for instance, like a 1/8. And then the 2 over 3, we know that we're going to need to write that in radical form. All right. So if we were going to do this question, even though I didn't really have it as an example, here's what you would do. You would first take the reciprocal of 8, which would give you 1 over 8. Now this is all to the power of 2/3. Well, 1 raised to the power of anything is just 1, so you can just go 1. And now 8, we would write it like so. The 8 comes under here, the 3 goes in front, and then we're going to square it. Well, what is the cube root of 8? The cube root of 8 is 2, so now we have 2 squared, and that would simplify to simply be 1/4. All right, so that's what we're going to practice here. You guys might want to try these on your own. They're kind of fun. 16 to the power of negative 5/4. Always, always, always get rid of the negative exponent. So it becomes 1 over 16 to the power of 5/4. Now we're going to write as a radical. 16 is our base. The 4 comes out in front. The 5 goes here. The 4th root of 16 is 2, so now we have 1 over 2 to the power of 5. And 2 to the power of 5 is simply 32. Next one we have here for B. Again, this one we have a fraction to a fraction. A lot of students will sometimes get confused. They'll think, oh, do I flip this one or do I flip the base? Always make sure that you're flipping whatever the exponent is being applied to. So this becomes 36 over 25, all raised to the power of 1/2 now. And of course, we know 1/2 just means the square root. So for this one, because there's not just a 1 in the numerator, you have to apply the 1/2 to both of these. So it becomes the square root of 36 all over the square root of 25, which we know is just 6 over 5. Okay. You might ask, well, why don't I write this as 1 and 1/5 right here? We're very rarely going to ever do this anymore in mathematics, all right? We're going to normally leave fractions as just improper like that as long as it's simplified. All right. This one's a little bit complicated. It's one that I've given you guys in your assignment. You'll have to raise it to a power of a negative decimal. I want you to always try and take whatever you have here as this negative decimal and write it as a fraction. As an example, if you have negative 0.4, you really have negative 0.4 technically over 1. Well, if we try to write this as a fraction, you can move the decimal place once and once here. It becomes negative 4 over 10. As a fraction, lowest terms, we have negative 2/5. So this is going to make life a lot easier here. We'll write this as 32, all raised to the power of negative 2/5. All right. Simplifying this now, we'll take the reciprocal of it. We got to get rid of the negative exponent. 1 over 32 now, raised to the power of 2/5. Because 1 raised to the power of anything is just 1, you can just write 1. And now we need to use the radical here. 5 goes out in front, like so. The 5th root of 32 means what number do you multiply by itself 5 times in order to get 32? It is just 2. So this is now equivalent to 1 over 2 squared, which is 1/4 as your final answer for that. Okay, so to reiterate what we learned here, make sure that you understand whenever you have something raised to a negative exponent that you take the reciprocal right away and then use the skills that we developed in lesson 4.4. That concludes this lesson.